You ever imagined packing your bags, leaving the place you're used to, and embarking on a journey you never expected? Have you felt the excitement just by thinking about a new adventure? Travel is more than just moving from one place to another. It's an opportunity to discover new worlds, breathtaking landscapes, fascinating cultures, and people who might change your life forever. It's a turning point, that moment when you step into a completely new place, where everything is strange and wonderful, sparking your curiosity. But what makes travel even more thrilling? Is it the feeling we get when we first see the airport and feel that rush of excitement with each step toward the unknown? Or is it the expectations that fill our hearts as we know that an unexpected adventure awaits us at every corner? Perhaps the magic lies in those moments before everything begins, when we don't know what's coming, but we know we're about to experience something unforgettable. Imagine starting your journey to a new place, not knowing what awaits you there, but your heart is filled with excitement and anticipation. Every moment takes you closer to an adventure that will change you, and will give you stories to tell for generations to come. Travel is about those moments when you're about to discover things you never knew about the world, but more importantly, you're discovering yourself on this journey. You step outside your comfort zone, you take risks, you face challenges, and you enjoy experiences filled with joy, laughter, and sometimes even tears. But now, here's the question: what if this journey was your chance to live a real adventure? What if this moment we're about to share is an opportunity to dive into a story where we explore a whole new world, and meet a character who faces challenges that could change their life forever? We're about to begin an unforgettable journey together. Let's immerse ourselves in this adventure and feel the excitement that only comes when we embark on something new. Let's begin the story. Now, we're about to embark on a thrilling tale filled with challenges, learning, and growth. Let's discover together what will unfold. Tom's life in Dublin had always been quiet, filled with a daily routine he never expected to change anytime soon. He worked at a small bookstore, a place he loved because its atmosphere was filled with stories and adventures he had always enjoyed reading about. He had a special passion for books that told tales of travel, and he always dreamed of packing his bag and traveling to new places. However, he only ever imagined it. He never thought that traveling to faraway places like America would be a realistic possibility in his life. His life was full of familiar daily activities, waking up early in the morning, going to work at the store, then returning home to continue reading or watch movies. He loved this life, but there was always that inner feeling that something was missing, something bigger than just the daily life in Dublin. He longed for something different, something beyond books, something that would take him back to the dream that had always been with him. The idea of traveling would occasionally flash in his mind, but he never had the courage to take that step. Then came the day that changed everything. He was sitting in a small cafe with his friends, and the conversation turned to the trips and experiences each of them had had. His friend Annie, who always filled her free time with travel, asked him about his future plans, and his answer was as usual. "I think about visiting America someday. But I don't think I'll be able to travel anytime soon." Annie smiled and said to him, "Why don't you do it now? Life is short, and travel is the best way to discover the world. You deserve an adventure." Her words were like a spark that lit the dream Tom had been hiding for a long time. He began to think about it more seriously and decided that it was time to take a bold step. Tom started researching tourist destinations in America. He read about New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. He was drawn to New York because of the hustle and bustle of the city and its cultural diversity, but there was also a strong desire to explore the natural places in California. He thought carefully about the trip and began planning it gradually. He decided to book a flight ticket and plan everything carefully to ensure that the adventure wouldn't be full of surprises. On a calm, sunny morning in Dublin, Tom woke up feeling an unusual excitement. This day was different from the others. He had already decided to begin the preparations for his long-awaited trip. He felt a strange sensation, as though everything in his life was leading to this moment. He got out of bed with ease, looked out the window at the blue sky, and smiled to himself. He felt that he was about to start a new chapter in his life. The preparations began when he took his passport from his desk. He looked at it carefully, remembering the moment he had first gotten it. He never imagined it would play a part in a long journey across the Atlantic. He held the passport in his hands and said to himself, "This passport is my ticket to a new adventure." He began going through his clothes in the closet, carefully choosing what he would wear for the trip. He knew he needed to be comfortable during the flight, especially since he would be spending long hours on the plane. He picked a simple white shirt and a pair of jeans. He added a couple of pairs of comfortable sneakers and some neutral-colored t-shirts. As he packed his clothes in his bag, he remembered something else important. He said softly, "I need my tickets." He went back to his desk and took the tickets from the white envelope. He looked at them and said, "These tickets will take me to America. I must keep them safe." He placed the tickets in the front pocket of his bag so they would be easily accessible in case he needed them. He took a moment to think about what else he might need during the trip. He started writing a small list of essentials: phone charger, headphones, a book to read on the plane, a water bottle, and a light jacket for the flight. He gathered all these items carefully and placed them in a small bag he planned to take on the plane. He was meticulous about making sure everything was ready perfectly. Before closing his bag, he decided to review everything once again. He sat on the floor beside the open bag and began to reorganize its contents. His bag now contained everything he needed for the journey: clothes, tickets, passport, and the essentials he would require for travel. There were a few moments when he hesitated, but deep down, he was sure he was ready for this challenge. He opened his phone and searched for a travel essentials checklist. He read some important tips: make sure your passport is valid, save an electronic copy of your tickets, and check the weather at your destination. He then added the small umbrella that was always in his bag for weather precautions. As he put the final touches on his preparations, he felt something different. He felt that this trip was the beginning of a new chapter in his life. He would be thousands of miles away from home, but there was a deep desire in his heart to discover a new world. There were many questions in his mind, but he was excited to face every challenge. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, he looked at his packed bag and said aloud, "Tomorrow, I will fly to America. A new chapter of my life begins." These words marked the beginning of a new adventure in Tom's life, an adventure where he would discover more about himself and the world around him. On the morning he had long awaited, Tom was finally ready to embark on his journey to America. He felt a surge of excitement, but his heart was also racing due to the huge change in his life. The idea of traveling to a distant place, of his own will, stirred feelings of both excitement and fear within him. Tom looked at his watch and noticed that he needed to leave now to arrive on time. He grabbed his bag, his eyes sparkling with excitement. He knew that today would bring with it many new and thrilling moments. He opened the door and stepped out into the street. The fresh air in Dublin filled his lungs, but his focus was on one goal: getting to the airport on time. The airport was not just the starting point of his new adventure, it was the gateway to a new life. He felt a bit nervous, but he knew he was ready for whatever would come. Tom got into the taxi that had stopped in front of him and quickly hopped in to begin his real adventure. He smiled excitedly at the driver and said, "Please take me to the airport." The driver turned the key, and the engine hummed with soft vibrations. He was a friendly man, with a short beard and a smiling face. He glanced at Tom in the rearview mirror and said, "Of course, we'll get there soon." The car started moving through the city streets, with old buildings passing by, until some modern landmarks started appearing. Tom looked out the window with excitement, but he felt that time was passing too quickly. His heart was pounding in his chest like drums. Everything seemed new to him, and as they passed through the crowded streets, he began to feel a bit anxious. Would he make it on time? Suddenly, he saw traffic come to a complete stop as cars halted at a red light. There were many cars ahead of them, and the traffic jam was clear. Tom felt a wave of tension come over him. "Will we make it on time?" he whispered to himself. The driver looked at Tom through the mirror and, noticing his anxiety, reassured him. "Don't worry. We will be on time. I know the best routes. I'll take a shortcut." Tom felt a bit more at ease. Despite the heavy traffic, the driver continued to drive calmly, focusing intently on alternative routes he knew well. The car navigated through side streets, avoiding the crowded main road. Tom began to feel better and started noticing the details around him, like the narrow streets and distinctive old buildings. As time passed, they made their way through the city, and the closer they got to the airport, the more Tom started to smell the nearby sea. The wind was refreshing, and he felt that his real adventure was starting to unfold before him. A part of him was still nervous, but he was more excited than ever. He was about to fly to a new country where there was so much to discover. As they neared the airport, Tom began to notice a shift in the atmosphere. The buildings grew taller, and people everywhere were carrying their bags, heading toward the gates. The airport began to appear on the horizon, shining with lights, as if inviting him to a new life that awaited him. As the car approached the main entrance of the airport, Tom felt a chill run down his spine. The thought of the plane that would take him far from everything he knew was something extraordinary. He wondered about everything that would happen during the flight. How would it feel to fly? What would it be like to see New York for the first time? These questions filled his mind, but he knew he would be ready. The driver stopped the car near the main entrance of the airport and said, "Here we are. Safe travels." Tom thanked the driver with a big smile and took his bag from the car. He paused for a moment in front of the airport, looking at the large building. The airport was buzzing with activity, with people from all over the world moving about. The gates pointed to different destinations: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. He said to himself, with great excitement, "This is it. The adventure starts now." He took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance, taking another step toward his big dream. And his journey had just begun. Tom arrived at the airport with quick steps, dragging his large suitcase behind him and carrying his small bag on his shoulder. His heart was pounding with excitement. This was a special day in his life. It was his first time traveling to a faraway place, and his destination was New York, the city he had always dreamed of visiting. He paused for a moment at the entrance, looking at the massive, bustling airport. Bright lights, huge screens, the sounds of announcements, and passengers walking by. It felt as if he had entered another world. He remembered the first time he had heard about New York, how it had seemed like a distant place in his imagination. Now, here he was, standing in the heart of the airport, on the threshold of a new adventure. Tom took a deep breath and started walking toward the large screens displaying departing flights. His eyes scanned the names and numbers until he found his flight, Flight AA-101 to New York, check-in counter 23. He smiled to himself and whispered, "This is my flight." But despite his joy, there were a few questions on his mind, especially since he was in a new place he had never visited before. Did he remember everything? Had he packed his bag properly? Was his passport and ticket in a safe place? As he walked through the airport, he felt a little lost, but he tried to focus on the directions the signs pointed to. There weren't many travelers heading to counter 23, which made him feel somewhat relieved. While waiting in line, an elderly man stood in front of him, speaking loudly on his phone, while a young woman beside him spoke in a language Tom didn't understand, but she also seemed to be traveling. Tom felt like everyone around him was used to traveling, and he was the only one who seemed out of place. He wondered to himself, will I be able to fit in here? Will I be able to handle everything correctly? These thoughts swirled in his mind, but he tried to focus on what was ahead. When his turn finally came, he approached the counter where a young, friendly employee greeted him with a warm smile. She radiated positive energy, which made Tom feel more at ease. She spoke calmly, "Hello. May I see your ticket and passport?" Tom smiled and said, handing her the papers, "Of course, here they are." She took the ticket and passport and began typing on the keyboard in front of her. Tom looked at the small screen displaying his information, his name, flight number, and destination. He felt a surge of excitement as he saw his name appear on the screen, as if confirming that his journey had become a reality. The employee smiled and asked, "How many bags do you have?" Tom pointed to his large suitcase and said, "Just one, this one." "All right," the employee said with a smile, then added, "Please place your luggage on the scale." Tom lifted the suitcase and placed it on the scale. He watched the numbers appear on the screen next to the employee. Luckily, the suitcase was within the allowed weight. The employee stuck a tag on the suitcase and said, "Perfect. Your luggage is ready to go." She then asked, "Would you like a window seat or an aisle seat?" Tom hesitated for a moment, then answered enthusiastically, "A window seat, please." The employee nodded, matched his details, and printed out the boarding pass, handing it to him along with his passport. She said, "Here is your boarding pass. Your flight is at gate 15. Boarding starts at 10:30 a.m. Enjoy your trip." Tom smiled as he took the boarding pass and thanked her, saying, "Thank you so much." As he walked away from the counter, he examined the boarding pass closely. He read the details aloud to himself: Flight AA-101, Gate 15, Seat 21A, boarding time 10:30 a.m. He felt a rush of excitement. His seat by the window was confirmed, and everything seemed perfect. On his way to the security gate, Tom felt a bit anxious, as there were still many steps he had to go through. While standing in line, he noticed another man approaching him. He turned to see an elderly man carrying a small bag, also on his way to security. The man smiled and said, "Long lines, huh?" Tom smiled and replied, "Yeah, seems like everyone's traveling today." The man laughed and said, "It's the busy season. But don't worry, it'll go fast. Just make sure you have everything ready for security." Tom felt more at ease after talking to the man. That small conversation had made him feel that he wasn't alone in this situation. When he reached the security checkpoint, there was another long line, but he didn't mind. He watched the people around him, some carrying small carry-ons, others with large bags, just like his. Suddenly, he noticed a little girl sitting on the floor, quietly crying. He walked over to her and gently asked, "Are you okay?" The girl's father smiled and replied, "She's just tired. It's her first time flying." Tom smiled and said, "I know what you mean. I'm a bit nervous too. But I'm sure she'll love it once we're in the air." The father replied, "We're all in this together, right?" Tom continued walking toward the security checkpoint, feeling like he was becoming part of this big journey. As he made his way through the security check, he felt a greater sense of peace. He spoke to a few employees, smiled at them, and chatted with fellow passengers. He felt like he was meeting people who shared the same dream: to travel, explore the world, and live adventures. After completing the check-in, Tom felt a sense of security and confidence. The journey had already begun, and nothing could stop him now. He said to himself, "Next stop, security check," as his eyes sparkled with excitement. Tom arrived at the airport security area feeling a bit nervous, as this was his first time going through this process on a long journey. The line ahead of him was long, and everyone seemed to be used to it, moving quickly between the machines and bins. Tom looked up at the large sign that read, "Please remove all metal items, belts, and shoes," and took a deep breath. He said to himself, "It's just another step. I can handle this." Then he walked confidently toward the line, paying attention to the travelers ahead of him as they took off their shoes and belts. He felt a little anxious, especially about what he needed to remove or place in the clear plastic bins. While waiting, he thought about everything that might embarrass him if he forgot it. My belt, my shoes, my watch, don't forget my phone. He tried to be meticulous in his preparations. He noticed that some people seemed relaxed, while others were struggling a little with the chaos. When his turn came, a staff member smiled and gestured for him to proceed. "Please place your bag in the bin and remove any electronic devices." Tom smiled and said confidently, "Got it." He then started emptying his pockets, taking out his phone and watch, carefully organizing his things. As he placed his items in the bins, he felt a sense of relief when he noticed how smoothly everything was going. The atmosphere was calm, and the staff worked together with the travelers quietly, which made him feel that the process wasn't as complicated as it seemed. The staff member kindly said, "Now, please step through the scanner." Tom walked toward the scanning device, which looked like it had advanced technology. He stepped through slowly, and suddenly, the machine emitted a low sound, making Tom turn quickly and ask the staff member in concern, "Is everything okay?" The staff member smiled and reassured him, "It's fine. Sometimes it's just a small thing. Let me check." The staff member began using a small handheld scanner, gently passing it over Tom's body for an additional check. After a moment, the staff member pointed at him and said, "You're good to go." "Thank you." Tom felt a great sense of relief. He collected his items from the bin and put his shoes and belt back on. As he was doing this, he noticed another staff member assisting an elderly woman who seemed confused. The staff member helped her place her bag in the bin and explained the steps to her slowly and gently. This moment made Tom realize that the airport staff were actually there to help travelers and provide support, not just for inspection and surveillance. He felt reassured, understanding that these procedures were part of the security measures and shouldn't be a source of stress. While organizing his belongings, he heard the sounds of security devices blending with the voices of travelers chatting with each other. One person asked for directions, another requested help on how to pack their bag properly. All these voices made Tom feel like he was part of a much larger world, filled with people going to different places to achieve their dreams. He took a deep breath as he headed toward the boarding gate, closing his eyes for a moment, saying to himself, "One step closer to the plane." This moment served as a reminder of how close he was to the start of his adventure. It was another step toward his dream in New York. As he walked through the airport, he noticed small details that made the experience feel more alive. One staff member was laughing with other travelers, another was speaking kindly with a young child. Tom felt that these moments made the airport more than just a place to wait. It had become part of the travel experience itself. As he neared the boarding gate, his excitement grew even more. The security check was just a small part of the journey, but he knew that every moment bringing him closer to the plane was another step toward his adventure in New York. While walking toward the boarding gate, he reflected on every moment of his experience at the airport, considering the details that made the journey feel more real. Next stop, the plane, he said to himself as he approached the next step of his adventure. The departure lounge was full of activity, with every corner of the space buzzing with life. Tom stood there, watching the crowd around him. Families, friends, and travelers heading to distant places moved swiftly, each with a different destination. Nothing calms the nerves more than knowing you're in the right place at the right time, on your way to achieving your dream. He looked at his boarding pass in his hand and read the flight details again. Flight AA-101 to New York, Gate 15, boarding starts at 10:30 a.m. He smiled and said to himself, I still have time, no need to rush. He began to wander around the lounge, stopping in front of shops selling New York souvenirs, mugs with pictures of the Statue of Liberty, small travel bags with famous city landmarks. He didn't intend to buy anything, but he enjoyed strolling around, as though everything in this place was part of his adventure. He wasn't just a passing traveler, he was someone getting closer and closer to his dream. He also passed by some cafes. The smell of coffee filled the air, so he paused to take a deep breath. He decided to grab a quick snack and went to one of the cafes. As he stood in line, he overheard a conversation between travelers about their upcoming trips. An elderly woman in line said, I'm visiting New York for the first time. Do you think I'll be able to find my way around there? A man standing next to her smiled and replied, Of course, but make sure to visit the World Trade Center. It's amazing. When it was his turn, he smiled at the barista and said, I'd like a coffee and a sandwich, please. The barista smiled back and asked, Anything else? Tom thought for a moment and said, That's all, thank you. He took his order and found a seat by a window overlooking the runway. From there, he watched the large plane slowly moving along the runway, and staff members wearing bright jackets directing the aircraft. The scene was mesmerizing, and he felt like he was in a movie. He took a slow sip from his coffee as he thought about the upcoming flight. In a few minutes, I'll be on a plane, flying in the sky, he whispered to himself. The thought of traveling to New York still amazed him. After finishing his coffee, he decided to check his gate. He walked over to Gate 15, which was displayed on the lounge screen. When he arrived, several other passengers were seated, waiting as well. He checked his watch and confirmed that he still had time. He sat on one of the comfortable chairs, observing the people around him. To his right, there was a family with a young child. The child was playing with a small toy plane, making airplane sounds as he moved it through the air. The mother laughed and said, "You look just like the plane." Tom smiled to himself. It reminded him of his childhood dreams of traveling. On the other side, two young men were enthusiastically discussing the tourist attractions they planned to visit in New York. "Are we going to Central Park?" one of them asked. The other, staring at his phone, replied, "Of course. And if we have time, we should stop by Times Square." Tom felt curious, so he approached a little and smiled. "Can you recommend a good restaurant there?" One of the young men smiled and said, "Definitely. There's an amazing Italian restaurant near Times Square. You should try it." Tom felt even more excited. He imagined himself wandering the streets of New York, visiting the places he had always dreamed of seeing. Yet, the excitement grew as the time for boarding approached. He heard the announcement over the loudspeaker, "Attention, Flight AA-101 to New York will begin boarding in 20 minutes." It felt like his heart was beating faster. "It's time," he said to himself. The crowd started moving, and all eyes turned to the gate. Tom pulled out his passport and boarding pass, quickly checking them to make sure he had everything. Passport, boarding pass, phone. He checked his pockets and took a deep breath. Then he heard the final announcement, "Attention, boarding for flight AA-101 to New York is now in progress. Please proceed to gate 15. Tom jumped up from his seat, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. He grabbed his small bag and walked steadily toward the staff member at the gate. The staff member greeted him with a friendly smile, saying, "Please provide your boarding pass and passport." Tom handed over his documents. The staff member took the boarding pass, stamped it, and said, "Verified. Enjoy your flight to New York." Tom took his boarding pass and passport, taking a step closer to the plane. He was nearing the moment he had always dreamed of. The excitement flowed through his veins as a smile spread across his face. "I won't believe it until I'm in the sky," he whispered to himself, his eyes fixed on the plane that would take him to his dream. With each step toward the plane, Tom felt like his adventure was just beginning. The plane began to ascend gradually, and with every passing moment, the view outside became more breathtaking. The white clouds seemed to draw nearer, almost within reach. Tom felt his excitement grow, and the sounds around him seemed to harmonize with his emotions. He spotted other planes in the sky, some flying at close altitudes, making the journey feel even more real. As the plane climbed higher, he felt more relaxed, yet his heart was still full of excitement. While gazing out of his window, he heard the sound of a flight attendant approaching. She smiled and said, "Hello, sir. Would you like anything to drink?" Tom smiled back and replied, "Yes, water, please." The flight attendant took his order and walked away with a smile, and Tom began to feel more comfortable in his seat. As he continued to enjoy the incredible view from his window, he noticed someone sitting next to him. The man looked to be in his mid-40s, wearing glasses, and appeared calm. Tom glanced at him for a moment, then smiled and said, "Hi. First time flying?" The man replied kindly, "Yes, actually. It's exciting and a little scary at the same time." Tom laughed and said, I totally understand. It's like a whole new world up here. The man added, I've flown many times, but there's always something special about it. The view, the feeling of freedom. Tom replied eagerly, exactly. It's like being above everything. I can't stop looking out the window. The man smiled and said, that's the magic of flying. At that moment, the plane seemed to stabilize after takeoff. Flight attendants began serving drinks and snacks, and passengers either chatted with one another or continued watching the skies. Tom felt even more at ease. He moved his hands slightly and took a deep breath as he gazed out into the distant horizon. Then, the captain's voice came over the intercom, ladies and gentlemen, we are now cruising at an altitude of 35,000 feet. The weather is clear, and we are on schedule. We'll be arriving in New York in approximately 6 hours. Tom felt a wave of relaxation wash over him. Time seemed to pass quickly, and he thought only a few minutes had passed since takeoff. He opened his laptop and began reading for a bit, though he found himself distracted by the view outside the window. As the flight continued, Tom noticed that some passengers had begun to fall asleep, while others were engaging in conversations with the flight crew. The atmosphere grew quieter, and the flight began to take on a more relaxed tone. Yet, Tom still felt a sense of excitement, knowing each moment brought him closer to New York. A few hours later, the crew began serving meals. The flight attendant approached him with a smile and asked, would you like the chicken or the pasta for your meal? Tom thought for a moment and replied, I'll have the chicken, please. She smiled and said, great choice. She placed the meal on the small tray in front of him. As he ate, Tom felt that the journey was becoming more enjoyable. He began to feel a connection with the people around him, and the atmosphere in the cabin was filled with quiet, soothing conversations. As he observed the other passengers, he found himself thinking about his upcoming adventure in New York. I'm almost there, he whispered to himself, feeling his eyes growing tired but unable to stop thinking about all the exciting things awaiting him in the big city. As Tom continued enjoying his meal, he felt a sense of relaxation. Everything around him seemed calm and peaceful, as if the flight had become a part of his daily routine. Yet, he knew deep down that this journey was just the beginning of something much bigger. Tom began to feel a slight pressure in his chest, a mix of nervousness and excitement filling his heart. He was approaching a moment he had never imagined before, the moment of landing in New York, the city he had always dreamed of visiting. The plane was in the early stages of its gradual descent, and the slight vibrations in his seat made him feel as though the entire world was coming closer. He watched through the window as the ground slowly approached, becoming clearer with every passing moment. Time seemed to pass quickly, and as the airport appeared below the plane, Tom couldn't help but say, wow. This is incredible. That moment felt like the realization of his dream, with other planes moving along the ground beneath him as he soared above them. The white clouds had disappeared, and the great city began to emerge from beneath them. The towering skyscrapers, busy streets, and bright lights were visible everywhere. Here I am. In New York. Tom thought to himself, feeling more and more excited as the plane neared the ground. The familiar sound of the descent intensified, and passengers began to prepare for arrival. With each passing second, his feelings shifted between excitement and a bit of anxiety. As the plane approached the runway, he felt a gradual decrease in speed, followed by the distinctive sound of the landing gear touching down. The plane shook slightly as the wheels made contact with the ground, then settled onto the runway. "Welcome to New York," Tom heard the crew announce over the intercom, as passengers began to gather their small bags and prepare to disembark. Tom felt the warm air greet his face as he exited the plane, the atmosphere noticeably different from his home country. When he reached the immigration hall, the place was bustling with people. Tom stood in line, waiting for his turn, watching the officers at the checkpoint carefully examine passports. His heart raced. When it was his turn, he approached the officer, who looked at him with a smile and said kindly, "Good afternoon. May I have your passport, please?" Tom handed over his passport, and the officer began to examine it carefully. Moments of anxiety passed slowly until the officer finally smiled and said, "Everything looks good. Welcome to the United States." The officer stamped his passport and added, "Have a nice stay." Those words marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. Tom felt a deep sense of relief after passing through immigration. He took his passport, held it carefully, and smiled, feeling like he had become part of this new place. But his adventure wasn't over yet. He still needed to pick up his luggage. He made his way to the baggage claim area, where he stood among other passengers waiting for their bags. The luggage spun on the conveyor belt, and Tom watched intently. He felt a bit tense until he finally spotted his bag. It was among the many others, and as he got closer, he hurried to grab it. That moment felt like a sign that the end was near. He had arrived in New York, and now he was ready to explore this vast city. His eyes wandered over the other travelers. Some were preparing to leave the airport, while others were heading to car rental desks or public transportation. As for Tom, he felt something different. His heart raced with excitement because, at that very moment, a new chapter in his life had begun. "I did it," he said to himself with a smile. Then he added, "Now the real adventure begins." He exited the arrivals hall, feeling something he had never felt before, a sense of being part of a different place, a place far away but filled with opportunities and adventures. The air in New York felt fresh, and the towering buildings surrounding him marked the start of something new. As he stepped out onto the busy streets, the sounds around him grew louder, and cars zipped by along the wide roads. With every step he took, he felt as though a dream had come true, and he was ready to face the challenges waiting for him in this city that never sleeps. "This is just the beginning," Tom whispered to himself as he moved toward his next adventure in New York City. After leaving the airport gate, Tom felt as though he had entered an entirely new world. The air was cool but full of energy, carrying the unmistakable scent of the city that never sleeps, New York. Ahead of him, the famous yellow cabs lined up in a long queue, while people moved quickly in all directions. Some talking on their phones, others rushing as if racing against time. The lights from the towering buildings painted a dazzling picture in the skyline, welcoming him in their own unique way. Tom headed toward the taxi line, his heart pounding faster as he approached the first cab. He waved at one, and it quickly stopped next to him. The driver, a friendly-looking man wearing a small cap, smiled and asked, "Where to, sir?" Tom replied, pulling out a piece of paper with the name of the hotel written on it, "To the Grand Midtown Hotel, please." The driver opened the door for him, then grabbed his suitcase and placed it in the trunk. He gestured for Tom to sit in the back seat. The cab started driving through the streets of New York, and Tom felt a mixture of exhaustion and excitement, watching everything out the window as though he were in a dream. The towering buildings with their glowing lights, the giant billboards showcasing everything from movies to the latest fashion trends, and the people crowding the sidewalks, all of it gave him a completely new sense of awareness. "Is this your first time in New York?" the driver asked with a warm smile, trying to break the silence. "Yes, it is," Tom replied, smiling, more excited than ever. "It's even more amazing than I imagined." The driver laughed and said, "You're going to love it. There's no place like this city." He pointed toward one of the buildings and added, "Look to your right, that's the Empire State Building. Beautiful, isn't it?" Tom quickly turned his head, his eyes catching the sparkling lights of the iconic building. "I've seen this in movies so many times, but seeing it in real life is something else," he thought in awe. The ride continued, each moment filled with wonder. The traffic seemed endless, the honking cars echoing through the air, and street vendors selling food from small carts lined the roads. The whole city was alive, and Tom felt like he was at the heart of a unique experience. About 30 minutes later, the cab pulled up in front of a luxurious hotel in the heart of the city. The gleaming facade was adorned with golden lights, and the entrance featured a revolving glass door through which guests came and went. The driver quickly exited, retrieved Tom's suitcase from the trunk, and handed it to him, saying, "Here you go. Enjoy your stay." Tom thanked the driver and entered the hotel with hesitant yet eager steps. The scent of fine perfume filled the large lobby. The floor was so shiny it almost mirrored his reflection, and the massive chandeliers hanging from the ceiling added an unforgettable touch of luxury. He walked toward the reception desk, where the staff greeted the guests with wide smiles. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Grand Midtown Hotel. Do you have a reservation?" Tom confidently replied, "Yes, I do. The reservation is under the name Tom Richards." The receptionist began searching the computer while Tom admired the artwork on the walls, depicting famous New York landmarks like the Statue of Liberty and the Brooklyn Bridge. Moments later, the receptionist looked up and said, "Ah, yes. I found your reservation. A single room for 3 nights. May I see your passport, please?" Tom handed over his passport, and after confirming the reservation, the receptionist handed him the room key with a smile, saying, "Here's your key, Mr. Richards. Your room is on the 12th floor, number 1203. The elevators are just to your left. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Tom thanked the receptionist, took the golden key with the hotel's logo, and made his way to the luxurious elevator. The doors reflected everything around them like mirrors. He entered the elevator and pressed the button for the 12th floor, feeling curious about what the room would look like. Upon reaching the 12th floor, he walked down the quiet hall, the soft carpet underfoot and light streaming through the small windows that overlooked the city. He finally arrived at room 1203. He inserted the key into the lock and opened the door slowly. The room was even more beautiful than he had imagined. The large bed was covered with a pristine white blanket, adorned with elegant little pillows. Next to the bed was a large window that offered a stunning view of the city. The tables were lit with small lamps that gave off a warm glow, and a comfortable chair by the window made the room perfect for relaxing. Tom placed his suitcase by the bed and walked toward the window. The view was breathtaking: city lights, busy streets, and cars that looked like a river of moving stars. He whispered to himself, "This is exactly what I needed. A new adventure in a city full of life." After a few minutes, he decided to take a shower to wash off the fatigue of the journey. The bathroom was elegant, equipped with everything he needed, from luxurious towels to personal care products. After the shower, he felt refreshed and sat in the chair by the window, sipping a glass of water. He started thinking about his plans for the next day. He wanted to visit the Statue of Liberty, then head to Central Park, maybe even stroll through Times Square in the evening. His thoughts were crowded with ideas, but he decided to let the surprises unfold. Finally, he lay down on the bed, pulling the soft blanket over him. This moment was filled with comfort and satisfaction, as he felt he was exactly. The next morning, Tom woke up to the sunlight that filtered through the large white curtains. He slowly opened his eyes and felt a refreshment he hadn't felt in days. The hotel room was incredibly quiet, with only a faint sound of the city outside. He sat up on the bed, stretched, and then said excitedly, "A new day, a new adventure." He quickly got up, splashed his face with cold water, and put on his comfortable clothes. He decided to start his day with breakfast in the hotel's dining hall, then plan his exploration of New York. As he entered the breakfast room, the smell of coffee and pastries filled the air. He saw neatly arranged tables and a wide variety of foods in an open buffet. He approached the table where chefs were standing behind hot dishes. One of the chefs smiled and said, "Good morning. Would you like some scrambled eggs or pancakes?" Tom smiled lightly and replied, "Good morning. I'll have some scrambled eggs, please." While putting food on his plate, he felt someone standing next to him. He turned to find a young woman smiling warmly at him. "You must be new here." "First time in New York?" she asked. Tom hesitated a bit but was happy to talk. "Yes, it's my first time. The city is amazing," he said. The woman laughed and said, "It is. Don't miss Central Park and Times Square. They're incredible." "Thank you for the advice," Tom said, feeling even more excited to start his day. After breakfast, Tom decided to explore the hotel before leaving. He was curious to learn more about this luxurious building. He started in the main lobby, where he saw a group of people taking pictures in front of a large Christmas tree in the center of the room. He approached one of the hotel staff at the reception desk and asked, "Excuse me, is there a rooftop here?" The employee replied, "Yes, sir. You'll love it. Take the elevator to the top floor. The view is spectacular." Tom went up to the rooftop, and when he stepped out of the elevator, he was awestruck by the scene before him. He could see New York from above, with all its beautiful details. The tall buildings, famous bridges, and even the Statue of Liberty in the distance. He stood for a few moments, watching the city beneath his feet and feeling an indescribable energy. "This is incredible," Tom said quietly as he took pictures with his phone. At that moment, another man approached, holding a professional camera. "Beautiful, isn't it?" the man said. "It's amazing. Are you a photographer?" Tom asked. "Yes, I'm here to capture the city's beauty." "First time in New York?" the man replied. Tom laughed and answered, "Yes. I feel like I'm in a movie." After this experience, Tom decided to head down to the fitness center and the pool. At the fitness center, the equipment was modern, and some people were running on the machines. He then entered the pool area, where the soft lights reflected off the clear blue water. He saw a young child jumping into the water, while his father called out to him from a distance, "Tommy, be careful." Tom laughed and said to himself, "Even the kids here have the same name as me." Finally, Tom returned to his room to take a short break before heading out to explore the city. He sat next to the large window in his room and began writing his plan. He decided to visit Central Park first, then head to Times Square in the evening. But he thought for a moment and said to himself, "What if I just go with the flow? Let the city surprise me." He got up from his chair, put on his jacket, and grabbed his small bag. Before leaving the room, he looked at himself in the mirror and smiled. "Here we go, New York." After his exciting tour inside the hotel, Tom returned to his room feeling a mix of tiredness and hunger, but he was happy with everything he had seen. He sat in the chair by the window, where he could see the city come alive. The colorful lights from cars and tall buildings gave the scene a magical appearance. He took a deep breath and said to himself, "What an amazing day. But now, I need food." Suddenly, he remembered reading about room service in a brochure he found upon arrival. He jumped up and walked over to the small table by the bed, where the brochure titled "Room Service Menu" was placed. He opened it curiously and started flipping through the pages filled with tempting photos of dishes. He hesitated between choosing the cheesy burger or the delicious Italian pizza, but in the end, he decided to order a full meal. "Grilled chicken with vegetables sounds perfect," he said to himself. But before finishing, he added crispy fries and fresh orange juice. He couldn't forget dessert, as the chocolate cake looked as if it was calling to him. He grabbed the phone by the bed and pressed the room service button. It wasn't long before a friendly voice answered, "Good afternoon, this is room service. How may I assist you? Tom smiled and replied, Hi. I'd like to place an order, please. Of course, sir. What would you like? Tom began reading from the menu confidently. I'll have the grilled chicken with vegetables, a side of fries, and orange juice. For dessert, I'd like the chocolate cake. The employee responded enthusiastically, Excellent choice, sir. Would you like anything else? He hesitated for a moment before saying, No, that's all for now. Thank you. Your order will be delivered in about 30 minutes. Enjoy your meal. Thank you so much, Tom said happily before hanging up. Tom sat waiting for his meal and decided to pass the time by watching TV. He switched the channel and found a program about New York, showcasing the city's famous landmarks like the Statue of Liberty and Central Park. As he watched, he began to plan the places he would like to visit. He imagined walking the busy streets of the city or taking pictures from the top of skyscrapers. During this time, his mind was occupied with the food. Every time he looked at the clock, he felt the minutes pass slowly. But after about 30 minutes, he heard a soft knock on the door. He quickly got up and opened the door to find a room service employee, a young man wearing the hotel uniform and pushing a small cart with a food tray. The employee smiled and said, Good evening, sir. Here's your order. Tom smiled back, Thank you so much. The employee helped him bring the cart into the room and arrange the food on the table by the bed. Before leaving, the employee said, If you need anything else, just call us. Have a great meal. Tom sat down at the table, excited to try the food. The dish was perfectly arranged, as if the chef had prepared it just for him. The grilled chicken was golden and cooked to perfection, and the vegetables were fresh and full of color. The crispy fries gave off a delicious smell that made his stomach growl even more. Let's see how this tastes, he said as he cut a small piece of chicken. When he placed it in his mouth, he closed his eyes, savoring the flavor. This is so good. Totally worth it. He enjoyed every bite, and the cold juice complemented his meal perfectly. Between each bite, he would glance at the cake, which seemed to be waiting its turn. When he finished the main dish, he decided to give the dessert his full attention. He picked up a fork and cut a small piece of the chocolate cake. As he tasted it, it felt like it melted in his mouth. The taste was rich and incredibly delicious. This is the best dessert I've ever had, he said with a wide smile. After finishing his meal, he felt full and satisfied. He lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything he had experienced during his first day in New York. He smiled to himself and said, Sometimes, it's the simple pleasures that make a trip unforgettable. He decided to take a rest before heading out to explore the lights of the city in the evening. He was sure New York would surprise him with more adventures and wonderful times. After resting for a bit in his room, Tom realized he needed a way to stay connected with his friends and family back home. His phone was working on roaming, but he wanted a cheaper and more convenient solution. He decided to buy a new SIM card for use in the US. He dressed quickly and left the hotel, excited to begin his first day in New York. The bright lights and sounds of the city filled the air, and the fresh breeze made his heart beat with even more energy. He opened the Maps app on his phone, looking for the nearest store to buy a SIM card. After a few minutes, he pinpointed a small shop nearby and decided to walk there. As he walked, he discovered the beauty of the city. The busy streets, the people rushing by, and the cars passing on the sidewalks, all of it was alive with energy. He noticed a corner of a street where a group of musicians were playing live music, adding a magical touch to the area. He arrived at the store with a sign that read mobile SIM cards and plans. He walked in and was greeted by a smiling employee who said, "Hello. How can I help you today?" Tom replied, "Hi. I need a SIM card for my phone. I'm here for a short visit." The employee responded, "Sure. We have different plans for tourists. Do you need data, calls, or both?" Tom said, "I mainly need data, and maybe some minutes for local calls." The employee took a small box containing the SIM card and started installing it in Tom's phone. While the employee worked, a beautiful woman entered the store holding a cup of coffee and smiling gently, which made Tom notice her for a moment. He couldn't help but smile back. She noticed his gaze, and they exchanged a friendly smile before she went to the counter to pay for her coffee. The employee finished installing the SIM card and said to Tom, "Your phone is ready. Just restart it, and everything will work fine." Tom thanked the employee, paid in cash, and then decided to send a quick message to his friends to reassure them, "Hi everyone. I'm in the US and just got a local SIM card. The trip has been amazing so far." He then headed back outside and made sure his phone was working properly. He decided to start his adventure in New York by walking toward the nearest subway station. When he reached the station, he felt even more excited as he saw the fast-paced life around him. Suddenly, he noticed a young couple standing on the platform, waiting for the train. They were talking softly to each other, laughing together sincerely. In that moment, Tom felt a warmth in his heart, imagining himself in a similar situation in the future. It was time for the train, so Tom boarded and sat by the window. As the ride continued, he observed the different faces around him, such as a young man reading a book, an elderly woman carrying a large bag, and a child hugging his stuffed animal. In those moments, he felt the diversity of life in the city. The announcement over the intercom mentioned the upcoming stations, and when the train arrived at Times Square, Tom got ready to experience one of the most famous landmarks in the city. He took the escalator up, and as he emerged onto the street, his heart raced at the sight of the dazzling lights and enormous screens displaying advertisements and movies. The energy of the place filled the atmosphere, creating a vibrant scene in his mind. As he walked around Times Square, he passed by a theater showing a popular play, noticing a long line of people waiting to get in. He stopped for a moment to admire the place and took a few photos for memories. Then, feeling hungry, he decided to stop by one of the famous pizza stands. He grabbed a slice of pizza and sat down on one of the benches in the open plaza. As he enjoyed his food, he noticed the young couple from the subway station sitting nearby. They were laughing together and sharing a slice of pizza. The simple yet romantic atmosphere made Tom feel as though the city was teaching him unexpected lessons in love and simplicity. Tom felt like New York was revealing its true beauty through such spontaneous moments. He decided to continue exploring the city on foot, filled with excitement and a desire to discover more. He walked through the bustling streets and then passed by a famous library, full of visitors browsing books or sitting on benches reading. Tom, who loved books, decided to enter the library for a while. As he browsed through a collection of books, a book about the history of New York caught his attention. He sat down on one of the comfortable armchairs and began reading a few pages. He felt as though the city was embracing him, offering him all the culture, art, and history he could ever need. When he left the library, he felt he had experienced more than just visiting a place. He had experienced life in a city full of stories. He felt that his day was just the beginning of a great adventure in a world full of surprises. After Tom returned to his hotel, the sun had started to set, turning the sky into a canvas of warm colors. He felt a surge of excitement as he planned his first day exploring the city. He opened the small map he had bought from the store on his way back and began marking his favorite destinations. He decided to start with a visit to Times Square, where the dazzling lights and bustling streets awaited, and then head to other parts of the city to discover its landmarks. He said to himself, "Today will be an unforgettable adventure." As he put on his coat and prepared to head out, his heart raced with anticipation. He left the hotel and made his way to the nearby subway station. He walked through the narrow streets, which held the true spirit of New York, streets filled with stories and surprises. Before reaching the station, he passed a small cafe with large glass windows, where he saw a young couple sitting in a quiet corner. He watched them as they exchanged words softly, and in a moment, the young man looked into his girlfriend's eyes and smiled a deep, loving smile. Tom silently wished for moments like these in this big city. He felt that New York was not just a city of noise, but also one full of love and romantic moments. When he arrived at the station, a smiling employee approached him and asked, "Hi, do you need help finding your way?" Tom smiled and replied, "Yes, I want to go to Times Square." After a few minutes of waiting, the train arrived, and Tom entered the crowded car. There was a group of people talking enthusiastically about their work, while others sat in silence. Suddenly, Tom noticed an elderly couple sitting across from him. The woman held the man's hand, gazing at him with love, while the man smiled at her gently. The atmosphere in the subway was ordinary, but this romantic touch made Tom feel a warm sensation in his heart, as though love filled every corner of the city. When they arrived at Times Square, Tom exited the subway and headed to the surface, where he was greeted by the dazzling lights and giant screens displaying advertisements. The place was alive with energy, and the streets were full of people from all over the world. But suddenly, something caught his eye. A young couple was walking side by side in the middle of the square, holding hands. They suddenly stopped amidst the crowd to watch one of the shows on the giant screens. The quiet moments between them reflected sincere love, as if they were in their own world, away from the noise of the city. Tom decided to continue exploring the city on foot. As he walked through the lit streets, he passed a small restaurant filled with visitors. He noticed a table in the corner where a couple was having dinner in a romantic atmosphere, their smiles reflecting a relationship full of harmony and calm. This moment perfectly encapsulated the spirit of New York, a city that blends dreams and reality, energy and tranquility. As he wandered through the streets of Times Square, he decided to stop at one of the small kiosks to buy a famous slice of pizza. The place was crowded with tourists, but suddenly, he heard soft piano music coming from one of the corners. He approached and saw a musician playing a calm melody on the piano amidst the hustle and bustle. The air was filled with romantic music, and people stopped to listen. In that moment, a middle-aged couple stood nearby, the man whispering sweet words in the woman's ear as they listened to the music. Tom felt as if the city was opening new doors of beauty. After finishing his meal, Tom decided to continue his exploration of the city. As he strolled through the streets of Times Square, he realized that the city was not only visually stunning, but it also offered moments that made him feel warmth in his heart. He passed by a luxury store where a couple was browsing jewelry together, their eyes filled with affection and tenderness. These simple moments made him feel that love still existed in every corner of this big city. Tom decided to stop at a fancy cafe that seemed to offer the best coffee. He ordered a warm cup and sat by the window. As he sipped his coffee, he felt something extraordinary happening around him. In the other corner of the cafe, there was a couple sitting together as if time had stopped for them. They exchanged words with a smile, and the feeling of harmony between them was unmistakable. Tom silently wished that he could have his share of such romantic moments in New York. As he continued his tour of the city, Tom realized that New York was not just a city of lights and loud sounds. It was also a city full of love, beautiful human connections, and romantic moments that turned every corner into an unforgettable experience. After Tom enjoyed his first experience wandering the streets of New York, he decided to dedicate the next day to visiting one of the city's most famous landmarks. While having breakfast at the hotel, he browsed the internet in search of a unique destination. He read about the Metropolitan Museum of Art and decided it would be his next stop. With a passion for history and art, he felt that this museum would offer a one-of-a-kind experience. Tom grabbed his map and charted his route to the museum using the subway. He packed his small bag, which contained a water bottle, his camera, and a small notebook for taking notes. He left the hotel feeling excited, eager to discover a new world full of stories and history. Of the massive building with its magnificent architectural style. The wide stairs were bustling with visitors of all ages, and cameras were capturing countless photos. Tom approached the ticket booth, where a friendly employee greeted him with a smile. "Good morning. Welcome to the Met. Would you like a general admission ticket or a guided tour?" Tom hesitated for a moment, then said, "I'd love to join a guided tour." It's my first time here, and I want to learn as much as possible. After purchasing his ticket, he followed the tour guide, who was leading a small group of visitors. The guide spoke with enthusiasm as they began their tour. Welcome, everyone. The Met is one of the largest and most famous museums in the world. Today, we'll explore some of its highlights, including ancient Egyptian artifacts, classical European paintings, and modern art collections. Tom felt excitement building within him as he entered the first hall. This section was dedicated to Egyptian artifacts, filled with massive statues, carefully preserved mummies, and jewelry dating back thousands of years. The guide stopped in front of a pharaonic statue and explained. This statue represents a pharaoh from the New Kingdom. It's over 3,000 years old and was discovered near Luxor, Egypt. Tom couldn't help but jot down some notes. Pharaohs. Luxor. 3,000 years. The group then moved on to the section featuring classical European art. There, they stood in front of a massive painting by the Dutch artist Rembrandt. The guide explained the details of the painting and the artist's unique style. Tom was captivated by the beauty of the intricate details and how the painting expressed complex emotions. It's incredible, Tom said to the guide. How these paintings can still speak to us after centuries. After 2 hours of the tour, Tom felt as though he had traveled through time, from the ancient world to modern times. At the end of the tour, they stopped at the museum's cafe, where Tom took a short break. He ordered a cup of coffee and sat down, reflecting on his notebook filled with new ideas and information. Before leaving the museum, Tom stopped at the souvenir shop. He bought a miniature replica of an Egyptian statue and a booklet about art history. He knew that these mementos would stay with him for a long time. As he exited the museum, Tom stood for a moment on the grand steps, watching visitors entering the building with excitement. He felt grateful for the experience and said to himself, "This is why I travel. To learn, to see, and to feel connected to the world." He decided to end his day by walking through the nearby Central Park to reflect on all he had seen in his day full of history and culture. For Tom, New York was more than just a city, it was a window to the world. After completing his tour at the museum, Tom stepped out onto the wide stairs at the entrance of the Met. He paused for a moment, watching the crowds coming and going, each person carrying a different story, each face reflecting the same excitement and awe that he had felt just moments earlier. The sky was clear, and the sun was beginning to lean toward the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the surrounding buildings. Tom leaned against the stone railing of the steps and took a deep breath, trying to absorb everything he had experienced that day. It felt as though his mind and heart had been filled with priceless treasures. He thought about everything he had seen inside the museum, the ancient artifacts carrying stories that spanned thousands of years, the paintings that still resonated with life despite the passing centuries, and even the other visitors who shared this unique experience with him. Everything pointed to one idea, that the world was full of beauty and knowledge, and every experience gives us a chance to understand ourselves and others more deeply. He looked at the bag containing the souvenirs he had bought. The small replica of the pharaonic statue felt like a piece of history he would carry with him always. He opened the art booklet he had purchased at the gift shop, flipping through the pages, looking at the images, and rereading some of the details the guide had mentioned. As he reflected, his thoughts began to wander even further. He remembered how anxious he had felt before coming to New York. He recalled sitting alone in his room back in his home country, wondering if this decision was the right one, and if he could truly embark on this adventure alone. Now, standing in the heart of one of the world's largest cities, he realized that traveling wasn't just about exploring places, but also about discovering oneself. He quietly said to himself, a smile forming on his face, "I'm not the same person I was when I arrived here. I feel connected to history, to people, to life." He glanced around and noticed Central Park stretching out before him like a natural painting, inviting him to continue his day. He decided to finish this experience by walking among the trees, where he could reorder his thoughts and enjoy a moment of tranquility. He entered the park with slow steps. The paths were filled with people, families playing, friends laughing, and street musicians playing beautiful melodies. Tom chose a bench under a large tree, overlooking a small lake. He sat there, pulled out his notebook, and began to write. Today, I walked through history. I saw stories etched in stone, painted on canvas, and carried in the faces of people I met. This city, with its chaos and beauty, has given me a gift, a deeper understanding of the world and my place in it. Every step I take here feels like a step closer to who I truly am. He looked up from his notebook and gazed at the lake in front of him. The water reflected the colors of the sky, which were beginning to turn shades of orange and purple. He felt the serenity of the moment, sensing that this was the perfect ending to his day. Slowly, he stood up and began walking toward the park's exit, but he knew that this moment would never truly end within him. Everything he experienced today would stay as part of his memories, always reminding him that the world is full of places waiting to be discovered and stories waiting to be heard. As he made his way back to the hotel, he realized that he wasn't just a visitor in New York. He was now a part of it. A part of its story, just as it had become a part of his.